Okay, so for today's episode, we are going to be tackling the topic of you aren't short on time, you're short on priorities. So I think this is a maybe a topic that might trigger some people because it tackles excuses, it tackles the stories that we tell ourselves that makes us feel better when we don't do what we say we're going to do. To you, what do you think about this concept of you aren't short on time, you're short on priorities?
Yeah. I mean, obviously that's can be very controversial depending on how you answer it. But for me, time is what you make it.
Hmm.
And yeah, I know this, like I said, this disputes the traditional ways of working, but I always believe that when you prioritize, you also learn to do things faster and more efficiently,
Mm.
which is why I said time is what you make it. And then, I mean, before I explain what I do, but the analogy here I'll use is once upon a time, there was a Ford that drove at a maximum speed of 60 kilometers from here to Cape Town. It would take you 2 days, 3 days to get there, right? That was fixed. The doing and the time was fixed,
Mm.
right? There was no way around it. But because it was a priority to get there, it became second nature to get there faster.
Mm.
And then you had cars that moved at 80 kilometers an hour, 100 kilometers an hour, 120 kilometers an hour. The speed limit also changed accordingly, and so did the safety of the cars, because the priority evolved accordingly because time is literally what you make it. So, what I pride myself on doing is I obviously focus on, my key priorities, mastering those key priorities and understanding how long they would take me in the initial stages. And I mean, the thing with priorities, I'm speaking work wise here, right? There's some things you can't fast forward, but work wise is that the more you get to understand what you're doing, the quicker and the more efficient you can do it. And
Mm.
therefore, have a longer list of priorities.
Mm.
You know, on the relationship side and family side, obviously priorities are limited because like spending time with family can't be rushed, you know, like 1 hour is 1 hour, right? But at the same time, the memories you make and your intentionality of being conscious can decrease the amount of time you need to spend to make that hour feel like an hour. I
Mm.
mean, a very good example, like I treasure having coffee or a beer or dinner with a friend for
Mm.
2 hours more than I would square over and chilling at the house.
Mm.
Same amount of time, one is lesser in terms of time, but more in terms of value given back to me. So yeah, I think when it comes to priorities, it's all about how you look at it. And time is what you make it, you know. Um, you literally dictate what time can do for you.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be bound, by the seconds or the minutes that the life has thrown at us for. So that's just my 2 cents. What are yours?
Yeah, I agree. Look, I think I look at this time priorities in the same bracket as focus. Um, and I'll use a great example. I think people often underestimate how much time they're spending on stuff that's not a priority to them. And if you had to give them the decisions of saying, okay, you say this is the thing that you want to do, but this is the thing that you're spending time on. Ask yourself honestly, which of these two is more important to you? So, for example, let's use the subject of exercise, which is something that a lot of people struggle with. People who work will say, because of my job, I don't have time to exercise. I have to get in the car, I must drive for traffic, I must pack my food, I must come home, I must do the dishes. They make a long list of things that they need to do, which they say this is the reason why they can't exercise. But if they look at their day and how they spend their time, more often than not, there's things in there that is going under the radar. So a great example is this, your cell phone. People will say, I don't have time to exercise. But if they check at their phone, the screen usage time, which we all have as a statistic, generally there's hours of time spent on the phone, right? And it's not productive time. So the question that you ask then is spending time on your phone a higher priority than exercising? And then in your mind, you'll say, no, definitely not. But your actions speak louder than your words.
For sure.
Your actions speak to your priorities, not your words. It's the same thing if you're in a relationship and your wife says, I want to spend time with you. And you say, yeah, but last night we were sitting watching TV. And she says, no, I want to spend time with you where we're present. And then you say, but we don't have time for that. It's like, oh, well, you just spend time on Netflix. What do you mean you don't have time for that?
For sure.
So that's why it's important this premise of saying you're not short on time, you're short on priorities. It's saying,
Yeah.
okay, time is a resource just like money. We have to spend it every day. And people, the thing that separates people is their choices of how they spend it. You look at it like an investor where you say, okay, I have 24 hours a day. 8 of those hours is going to be spent on sleep if I'm healthy, maybe 6 hours, if I'm being more realistic. Uh,
Yeah.
but how am I going to spend the 18 hours that's left? How am I going to invest the 18 hours that are left? You know, so I guess I'm being very like harsh on the subject because it's something that I've had to grapple with myself in the past. And right now, the way that I'm getting it right is by being very hard on myself about it and saying, okay, you say you don't have time for this, but like there's time. You're just not spending it
For
wisely,
sure. For
right?
sure. For sure. For sure. And I like that, right? And that's why, I mean, the summary I get from you also is that time is what you make it, right? It's a currency, right? And how you spend it determines the overall quality of
Yes,
it and what you can get from it, right? And like, like you speak about the priorities that you choose
yeah,
also need to be allocated a specific amount of time, you know, and just because you allocate something more time, it doesn't mean that it's more important,
exactly. And I
you
think
know,
being honest with yourself is the important thing. So like you need to have
100%.
an alignment between what you think is important and what you are actually spending time on. And often I would argue there is a misalignment here in a lot of people's lives. And so I would say, like, if you think to yourself, okay, I'm not making progress in an area of my life, the question you should ask yourself is, are you making this a priority? And 9 times out of 10, the answer would be no. It's like, okay, maybe you are making it a priority and the actions that you're taking are not effective, which is a
For
different.
sure, 100%.
The first starting point is how much time are you spending on this? And, is there a way that you can optimize the rest of your life so that you can focus more on this thing that you say is important? So it's like you look for solutions. If you are spending an hour every day doing dishes, for example, maybe it's a worthy investment to buy a dishwasher so
Yeah,
that you can delegate this, which dishes is not important. Having a clean house is, but
yeah, for
you
sure,
doing the dishes yourself is not important. So maybe you can
100%.
hire someone else to do it. So like a great example of this, Alex Hormozy, if you guys don't know who he is, just check him out. He said the first time he closed the sale, it took him an hour and he made something like $500, right? And he said after he did that, he realized an hour of his time was worth $500. So his decision-making approach was anything that costs me less than $500, I will no longer do. I'm going to outsource it to somebody else so that I can maximize the time I spend on this thing, which is making a lot of money for myself, which was a priority for him.
For sure, for sure,
So other people will be like, wow, like you're paying someone this much to make food for you and to clean your house and to do this and to do that. And he's like, yes, of course, because it's not important to me. And that is how you're not short on time, you're short on priorities. Because when you make it a priority to spend time on what's important to you, you realize there's solutions. There's solutions, there's ways that you can avoid doing these other things. Instead of going
for
to the
sure,
shop yourself, order it online. You now have extra time. Yes, it costs you a bit of money, but how much is your time worth? And that's the psychology of it, you know?
Determining the value of your time, right? And I mean, like I love the example you made about dishes, right? So doing dishes is always a priority, no matter what, right? But when you understand the value of your time, you optimize it accordingly, and it no longer becomes a priority because it becomes an automated part of your day,
Yes.
right? And I also like that example because, you know, doing the dishes for long enough when it was once a priority leads to you now making to save up for the dishwasher become a priority, which
Absolutely.
then builds in the efficiency that I spoke about, right?
Yeah.
To spend less time doing it by automating it.
Ab-
So I also feel like when it comes to priorities, it's like they must evolve. The
yes.
more you spend time on it and the more you understand it, the more your brain should naturally be like, how can I do this better? How can I handle this priority in a better way? When it comes to work, we speak about efficiency. When it
Mm.
comes to relationship, we speak about experience.
Yeah.
You know, how
Actually.
do you marginally increase what you experience and what you get from the time? And once you can do that, then you can also marginalize it, right? So instead of spending 5 hours, you can spend 2 hours together and feel the same satisfaction, you
Absolutely.
know? And I think that's what life is about at the end of the day. I think when you understand your priorities properly from like a time and a prioritization perspective, you make room for more
Absolutely.
and you make room to not only improve yourself and your life, but the lives of those around you as well. And ultimately create a better life experience. So I think yeah, it starts there, dude. How
Mm.
you handle your priorities cascades into everything else because it's those things that you focus on that determine the flow of everything else.
100%. And the thing that I would add to that as well is I think it's important to remember the priority is the outcome and not the action.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is like your priority is not doing the dishes. Your priority is having clean dishes, which is different because if your priority is doing the dishes, then you're saying to yourself, I must do the dishes myself every night. But if your outcome is, if your priority is the outcome, you're saying, I don't care how these dishes get done as long as they're done, and preferably as long as I'm not doing it. So, like, it's like a psychology. It's the same with exercise. It's like, okay, if your outcome is, I want to be in good shape, your priority is that. Your priority is not spending 2 hours in the gym every day. So what you do is you try and find solutions that cuts the time you have to spend in the gym to get,
Mm.
and that's like the psychology. Tim Ferriss in his book The 4 Hour Work Week, he talks a lot about this thing called the minimum effective dose, meaning the 80-20, the 20% of inputs that gives you the 80% of outputs. Your goal is not to be 100%. Your goal is to get great 80% of the least amount of input as possible. And that's a great way. It's a great way to to navigate life with that psychology, you know, saying let me not do more than is necessary. I will do what is needed and that's it, you know.
Oof, oof. And 80/20, like once again, right? Time is what you make it,
Yeah.
right? How do you optimize and how do you make sure that like it's not pound for pound?
Mm.
Like I think pound for pound is a very good philosophy, but like there comes a time when doing things smarter in every element of your life actually adds more value, right?
Absolutely.
And exposes you to more and brings you closer to yourself and to those around you, you know? And I think that's the way to follow it. And like I said, time is what you make it. You always have that, then your priorities will automatically sort themselves based on how you engage with them,
Yes.
And I love what you said there as well about the fact that your priorities are the outcome, not the actual task,
Yeah. I mean, you are
right?
a great example of this in the sense of the style that you have with connecting with people is very quality over quantity
Yeah,
orientated.
yeah,
So, like, when you are with a person, you give 100% of yourself to them in that moment so that the emotional bank account can get filled as much as possible. That's my thing as
100%.
well. And you know, there are people that you can feel closer to that you see very sporadically. And then there are people that you can see all the time that you feel very little for because the emotional bank accounts are being filled differently, right? Like imagine a coworker that you see every day. And when you see them, they give you nothing. They don't smile. They don't give a shit about your life. Like imagine spending so much time with a person and feeling so little for them. That is the ultimate like inverse of what we're trying to do.
100%.
You know?
100%. I think it's unfair on you and on the person as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's inauthentic. And essentially it's being untrue to yourself and to those around you, which I think is the worst thing that you can do for your time on earth, right? You want to
Absolutely.
be purposeful and you want to be intentional and you want to uh, live it to the fullest by ensuring that your energies are put out in such a way that every day is memorable and every day is serving you and serving those around you.
You know, it's kind of like living a long life versus living a life with a lot that goes on in it. You want to avoid that long life where very little is lived. You want to live a life where the time that you had was spent wisely. And that's why,
100%.
like, you can see a guy like Jimi Hendrix or James Dean, you know, people who are part of the 27 Club, but their names are remembered in history long after they passed
Yeah,
because they used their time to the
for
fullest.
sure. For sure. Sure. Wow. So beautifully said. And I don't think there's any better way to end that, right? You want to have a life that has a lot of stuff happening in it, not a long life that has nothing happening in it, right? And I think that just speaks to stalling, right?
Mm,
Some people just stall through life, you know,
mm,
rather than attack it and experience it for what it is. So, such a
absolutely.
beautiful saying, and I'm actually gonna write that down after this session. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Well, yeah, that's everything from us today. I hope that the people who are listening got some benefit from it, and we'll speak to them again next time.
Julio, thanks, Alex.